We're going to go right into the Clerk of Courts. And just to be clear, there's 4 people running for the Republican primary. They were all invited, so we'll leave it at that. The Clerk of Courts, now we're getting into the significant money. This makes somewhere around $105,000 a year with opportunity to make a little bit more. And this isn't set by the state, I believe. But this is a real job. We'll go right into questions. Let Richard Tallman start right off.
I'm going to start with a softball question for Kevin, mainly because I've been in this community for 25 years, and the Clerk of the Court's office has been the providence of Mr. Dan Coolidge, who's done an extraordinary job. Quite frankly, I don't know what that job is. So, Kevin, if you would be so kind to enlighten me and our audience, specifically what does the Clerk of the Court do? How many employees are in that office? And what's its annual budget?
Okay, the short answer is the clerk does all the right things. Or at least it has for the last 29 years. 3 parts to the question. First, there's 97 employees in the office. The annual budget, you can think of it in 2 different segments, the court-related and non-court-related. Non-court-related budget is about $3.5 million, and that is funded by your ad valorem property taxes passed through the county's general fund. The court side, again, is about $3.5 million, and that is funded through the general appropriation process by the legislature in Tallahassee. What the clerk does is a rather complex answer, because there's a judicial study that identified 926 distinct constitutional and statutory duties of the clerk. But in a nutshell, the clerk helps the court system function smoothly by providing the clerks in the courtroom to the judges, as well as frontline clerks in the traffic, civil, criminal areas. That responsibility of the clerk is pretty much ministerial. There's not a lot of discretion involved in that, but it's very important duties, obviously. The clerk also is the clerk to the Board of County Commissioners, the keeper of the county's official records, attends the VOCC meetings, keeps the minutes, and aids the commissioners in executing a smooth operating commission meeting. Here, institutional knowledge is important for the clerk to have, because as the meeting goes on, there's questions about historical facts or where a certain ordinance or practice came from. And if the clerk doesn't have the answer, well, the meeting bogs down. Probably the most visible duty of the clerk is running the county's finance department. The county commissioners are the policy makers. They decide how to spend your money, what to spend it on, how much of it to spend. The clerk holds the checkbook. The clerk has custody of all the assets, all the money, is responsible for investing the money, and is the final review for a payment. The clerk can't say, we don't want to make this payment because it's wasteful. The clerk can only deny a payment if it's not legally appropriate or for legitimate county business. But the important function of operating the finance department is really the check and balance. Again, the final set of eyes on expenditure before the check is cut. Finally, the clerk in running the finance department is also responsible for the overall county audit and the publication of the county's official financial statements, which requires a thorough knowledge of accounting standards and the county's finances in particular. And finally, the clerk has the audit powers. The internal audit department is housed inside the clerk's office, separate from the finance department for specific reasons. Finance has custody of all the records, but audit has to be independent, and they review those records on during audits in county departments. Any agency, not-for-profit or company that does business with the county also is subject to audit by the clerk. So that is the kind of the area where the clerk can give the public confidence that.
I'm going to have to cut you off there, Kevin. Just so in the interest of time, we're trying to keep things at around 2 minutes, but it is very hard to explain what 900 functions
Yeah,
is.
there's a few more.
2 minutes, so we're just trying to get there. So, well, thank you. Send it over to any follow-up. Richard better not be one. So, do you have a follow-up or? Oh, I was going to let Ed start. Yeah. Next question is for Ed Scales, to whoever.
Stuart, this is a question for you. If elected, and this is totally take the opposite view, this is kind of a hardball question. If elected, when, and I'm asking for a date, will civil and criminal pleadings and filings be available to the public online?
Well, Ed, as a member of the bar, you might not be aware that the e-filing system has actually begun for a number of members of the bar as a test run. So that should be going in very, very quickly. Okay. That should be going in very, very quickly. As far as the date certain that you're asking me, it's not necessarily within my control because it uses a statewide system to make these documents available. However, if elected, I can guarantee you that within the first quarter of my tenure, there would be no problem getting that online, if not sooner.
So as a follow-up, there are some jurisdictions where the filings are available, just not in the 16th Judicial Circuit. It would be a priority of yours to have filings available online for the public to view in criminal and civil cases.
Absolutely, Ed. I'm aware that in federal courts, of course, they already are online, and that is a tremendous resource to both members of the bar and the public to be able to look up, not just see the docket, the list of documents filed, but what they actually contain, so that you can see where these documents came from and what's contained in them. So that would be very important.
Yeah, I have a follow-up to that for Mr. Gardi. It's been said that the state has had trouble implementing electronic filings, and that is the reason, and there has been some problems with that. What are those problems, and how does it affect us as far as electronic filings are concerned?
The state's done. The state's component of this was putting together a portal where you can submit those documents. And I think to Mr. Scales' question is, we're really looking at how documents get in, and that's what's the e-filing. And I think your question was really more related to how can the public access those documents after they're in as well. The state developed the e-portal. Now there's 67 different counties that have to be able to receive those documents, because as an attorney or a pro se defendant or anyone filing those documents, you should be able to file to multiple counties. The way they resolved that was to create an e-portal at the state level. And it was the duties of the county to actually be able to receive those and integrate those documents with their individual 67 individual systems. And some counties are already able to do that 100%. Our county has been missing and missing every deadline. We are currently just barely testing circuit civil e-filing. Now, in regards to accessing those documents, the clerk's office currently uses a system called Odyssey, and staff is scanning most of those documents into the Odyssey system. And to answer Mr. Scales' question, the day I take office, I think I can probably pull a switch and get that online for you. And that's how simple it is. The system is not being utilized. Having been the tech director at both the state attorney's office and the public defender's office, I'm very familiar with all of those systems. And I'm also understand when systems are underutilized. And this is exactly what's happening in our case. With my track record, what I have done is I've implemented a document management system, paperless, in the state attorney's office, where we also started to do redactment, very inexpensively and provide discovery electronically to all the defense attorneys in town. And a lot of the defense attorneys know suddenly they started receiving their discovery electronically. We're totally underutilizing our systems. It's costing us money by delaying, so the sooner you get it done, the sooner you start taking some of those costs, making some of those cost advantages.
Well, then I guess my follow-up is to you, Mr. Maddox. Why is that? Why haven't we begun?
That's not completely accurate. We are, Circuit Civil has been in test case as mandated by the Supreme Court for going on 60 days. We've added, I believe, probate and family. By the 90th day, we will have all Circuit Civil e-filing, and if the Chief Judge, at that point, the Chief Judge will review the statistics and the accuracy, and if he gives the go-ahead, then e-filing will be open to all attorneys in the county. And that will be within 30 days. And actually, it's going fairly smoothly. All the counties are going through the same issue that we are. There's confusion. Some counties have had e-filing on their own for a couple of years, but those are large counties with huge IT staffs that spend millions of dollars implementing their own e-filing systems. They are mandated by the state to use the e-portal, so essentially they have to retire the systems that they are using and go to the state's e-portal system. And we all have the same issues of the systems talking to each other. It's being worked out, but we're not behind.
Let me break in quick. Ezra, you're going to be next. As much as the panel here is attractive and everything, please look at that pretty blonde lady behind the camera, because we're filming this, and I've been told that you're getting massage on the back of your head more than your face. So with that, Ezra.
Matt, I have a philosophical question for you, not technical, and admittedly we're kind of midstream in the middle of this issue, so not all the facts have come out, I don't know. But I'm curious, with regard to the stand up for animals issue, do you feel that the clerk's office made a bit of an overreach on this, or do you think should we expect the same kind of aggressiveness if you're elected to that office? Are you going to pursue those types of matters just as diligently?
I think that's a great question, Ezra, and thank you. I think the clerk's office did overstep their bounds a little bit. I think it was deliberate. It was selective. Although I'm going to come out and tell you I'm a government watchdog, and I will be just as diligent with every agency. And I think there's a little difference that I would bring to the table, although apparently in Mr. Maddox's first response, he thinks it's really defined what the clerk does. And I think the clerk's role is more than just financial accounting. It's also financial accountability. So I would look, the clerk's office is integral to all the agencies in the county and can look where resources are, but can also not just balance the debits and credits, can say, when are we misspending our money? For instance, I have brought up that we pay for our rent at the public defender's office. And I think that's something that we can consolidate and get into some public buildings. And as the clerk, instead of listening to the public defender say she's coming up for a 5% increase, I would bring it up, regardless of how I do, I would bring it up as a gadfly and say, listen, we should not be spending $250,000 on waterfront property for the public defender's office. And I just cite that as one example. So while you should be diligent with the audits, you should not be selective, and you should also be watching financial accountability. How are our money and resources being used?
What about the move to freeze rather than agency's assets? We're talking about nearly $250,000, and that was, I believe, recently overturned by the 3rd District Court of Appeal.
Yeah, I think that was wrong, because I think there was too many factors coming into play. There might have been some bookkeeping errors, but in the same sense, I think that overstepped the bounds and really put the county out for liability in that sense, because really, the way she may not have been keeping all the money in the right place, but she also had other avenues of raising money. And we made agreement for that situation to evolve that way, and really delineating for her as the process went on and as the responsibilities unfolded. So to come back afterwards and lock out all her assets, I think exposed the county to extreme liability. And I really think there was somewhat of a selective process for some other reason that they went after just that agency. Now, granted, you did find some problems. which would probably exist almost in any agency if you really went after, or any nonprofit under contract. You can always find it. No one's perfect. I'm not perfect. We all make mistakes, but I do think it was wrong to do that and freeze those assets.
Stuart, what would you put in place to keep tabs on equipment and that under $1,000 in the clerk's office?
Well, again, that's a technical question, and it's very clear that in this modern day of technology with barcodes and so forth, you can have a computer scanning barcode method that reads in all of the that reads in all the items into the computer system. You know, much more important, Richard, than the $1,000 is the big oversight item that the clerk has to be responsible for, including this oversight function that the clerk has, the checkbook, that they control the checkbook, and that if expenses of the county are not legally compliant, that the clerk can turn them down. And that's probably the most critical function of the clerk. We're so at the $100,000 rate.
Kevin, this is a follow-up question to that detailed explanation as to what the clerk of the court does. Rather than being kind of like the anointed or the hand-selected successor to Mr. Coolidge, and the fine job that he's done over the last 26 years, what does Kevin Madok bring to this position that's new, that's fresh? Why should the public elect Kevin for this position, or is this, are you just a representation of a continuation of a job done in the past?
I don't think if the next clerk runs the office as well as Danny Coolidge, there's anything wrong with that. I'm not going to sit in that seat and think every day, what would Danny do? I know how the office is run, and I know the right way to run it. But I will be Kevin Madok, the clerk, and not Danny's successor, the clerk. The continuity in this office is critically important, though, because the clerk, in my opinion, really is the anchor of county government. I don't think anyone questions the motivation of any decisions that have been made. And what I bring to the office is independence. I haven't worked in any other aspect of county government, so I don't have any intended or unintended influences. Also, business, big things are happening. Business is going along. The Cudjoe Regional project, which is being planned right now, we're examining the cash flow issues for a $156 million project. The next clerk will be elected in the November election, but at that same election will be a referendum to extend the 1 cent sales tax. If that's successful, we have to immediately bond that money out. We're looking at cash flows in the Cudjoe Regional, and by that time, Aqueduct is going to be spending $18 million a quarter. That cash is coming from our books. We have to have that cash available, or that project grounds to a halt. We're analyzing that right now, planning for it, but there's no delay. If a new clerk steps in, that bond issue isn't going to wait for the new clerk to come up to speed. We're deciding right now whether we're going to do one phase or both phases at once. The Aqueduct wants to do both phases at once. It looks like the cash flow will be a month or two where there won't be the cash available, but we're planning for that. That's the example of the continuity. Business is happening. The next clerk has to be ready to carry on.
This is a question for Matt. In the past, you've been critical not just of this clerk's office, but I believe clerks around the state for their role in the foreclosure crisis. Can you be very specific in what changes you would bring to the clerk's office with specific regard to those criticisms that you've had of the clerk's offices with regard to the foreclosure crisis.
Sure. One of those critical components of the clerk's roles in our country is maintaining the land records. And what has happened there is the banks have decided in the last 10, 12 years that they would create their own system to maintain the transfers of and title histories in terms of the mortgage assignments. And what they've done is they've evaded the filing fees that would have normally occurred at the clerk's office. Now, county clerks around the state and the nation are suing the mortgage electronic registration system, this third-party corporation, in terms of trying to regain their right to maintain the land records. Now, state statute doesn't require that those filings occur at the county level, but it's implied that the clerk is the place where we keep those land records, and for hundreds of years that's worked well. I think we have to lobby the state legislature, one, change the legislation to make sure, because of what the banks have done, no one ever conceptualized that someone would usurp the authority of the clerk's office. We have to more define that role of the clerk's office and make it accountable. We have to recapture the filing fees, and most importantly, what that will do is it will restore the integrity of our land records. I've done research on hundreds and hundreds of cases, not just foreclosures, but mortgages, satisfactions, and what you have is fabricated documents based off notarizations that were fraudulent. And if you're going to have creditors coming out of the woodwork that will make this a legal liability for decades to come if you don't start addressing it. We can stick our head in the sand and say everything's going along fine, but we know it's not. We need more revenue. Part of that's the filing fees that are being evaded, and we need to make sure our tax base is defended, and that is our property values, and that's the integrity of our title histories. We have to address every filing that comes through that clerk's office and look at it like a microscope and make sure there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. We have, as you've seen on 60 Minutes, Linda Green signed tens and thousands of mortgage assignments throughout this country. We have those on our clerk's office in Monroe County. We have documents from law firms where lawyers sign the mortgage assignments over on behalf of 20, 30 different banks as officers of those banks, and they're not officers of those banks, and people notarize those documents. That right there destroys the integrity of our land records. We have to scrutinize them case by case and let people know that. In fact, Pam Bondi just today recommended that clerks should refer anything fraudulent to the state attorney's office. To my knowledge, that's never been done in our county. The one case that Dennis Ford is looking at is brought to him by Matt Gardi because of the research I've done on the fraudulent filings.
Question for Stuart. You served on the school board's audit and finance committee during obviously one of the more tumultuous times in the board's history. I want to talk to you a moment about transitioning into this new role. While the role of the clerk's office in many ways is that of watchdog, it is primarily that of administrator. I'm curious what you feel the biggest challenge or challenges are going to be in transitioning to a management role, overseeing the running of an office that has dozens of people. How do you make that turn? How do you make that transition? What do you think will be the biggest hurdle?
Well, Ezra, you know, the audit committee is a volunteer board that I just served on recently, and I'm very, very proud of the work that we've done. I feel if it wasn't for the work of this audit committee, we probably wouldn't be sitting where we are with a new superintendent coming on board and so forth, and we can go into that. And I think I have demonstrated through my work on that audit committee that I have the courage and fortitude to face up to the political challenges and do the right thing regardless of what happens face to face. In terms of my background, that's not the only thing that I've done in my lifetime, of course. And I was also the president of the school board in suburban Philadelphia for 12 consecutive years. My colleagues on that school board who watched my work elected me as their chair 12 consecutive years in a row, just like my peers who saw my work on the audit committee elected me their chair for, again, two consecutive roles. So I have been very, very involved in the management of very large organizations. Not only I was the administrator here in Monroe County for the Child Support Enforcement Office that handled over 2,500 legal cases, taking care of paternity and child support, working closely with the court system in Monroe County. I was elected as an officer of both the Pennsylvania State School Board Association. The governor appointed me on the statewide Hines Insurance Trust. I was an officer of the National School Board Association. everything that I've done, the people have moved me into higher responsibilities, overseeing very, very large organizations where we've had a lot of success in those organizations. Now, in terms of the transition from the audit committee, that's exactly what I have done on the audit committee. The success that we've had there is exactly the type of thing that I would like to bring to the clerk of court's office. I have a very personal reason for running for this office, because in 2005 I did work in county government, and when I was there and I saw problems, I would go to the county commission and the county administrator. I didn't always get relief, but what I did find somebody who would listen and take care of mismanagement was always Danny Colich, who would sit down and listen. I said, oh my God, Danny Colich is retiring. It's extremely critical that we replace him with somebody with the same commitment and integrity that has been in that office for those years, and that's the reason I would like to run.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to follow up on that. And you were saying there are 93, Kevin, 93 employees, 97 employees. And I guess I would ask you, Matt, what experience do you have in managing employees?
Sure. Well, first of all, I have served as acting executive director of the state attorney's office, which had between 50 and 55 employees. But I think more so is my experience in the U.S. Army. I worked as a civilian that was deploying software, and I was given a directive by stateside Pentagon to go over to Europe and implement technology over there. And the struggle there was I had hundreds of users that were going to be using this software that were under a requirement that I was mandating. But at the same time, they had their own command structure, whether it be at the basic work battalion or their area support group. And so you had to make sure that everything you were bringing in and asking employees to do, but not necessarily direct employees, but people that I was managing and asking to perform by changing their work and working with a different system. The challenge there was everybody there said, I've got a different boss, but I still had to be able to work with those people and had that challenge. I think we had a very successful deployment of that software system over the course of 2 years over in Europe. And it's, what I always bring out is, I think it's important to be empathetic to those end users. And so when I go out and the systems I've implemented at the state attorney's office, again, I'm not necessarily the supervisor as a tech director at the state attorney's office, but I am sure asking people to do a lot of work and change what their workflow. And at that point I say, I want to know what the end user is experiencing. I don't just dictate, hey, this is the system we're going to use and that's what's going to happen. And I think to some extent that's what's happened at the clerk's office is they have a decent system, the end users haven't really, they've either been frustrated, they haven't been trained with those systems, and it's those systems that actually can create the most cost savings and most enhancements to the public service that are already sitting there. Now, true, they may not be perfect, but the end users need to be able to have somebody from the top down who's going to understand their job role and be empathetic to the way they have to do their job and serve the public.
All right, guys, that's it for our clerk of court.